Handlebar rise is a measurement of the change in height from the center of the bar out to the bar ends. It's a number that gets talked about a lot in mountain bike circles, but is rarely brought up with drop bars. As the alt bar philosophies of comfort and utility have become more prevalent though, more drop bars are being designed with some added rise. Earlier this year, Redshift announced their top shelf bar, a drop bar with 25 degrees of flare, and most interestingly, options for 50 or a whopping 70 millimeters of rise. While not the first bar to market with a good amount of rise, the beautifully simple way they did it, along with some other design choices, made this bar an overnight success. I've been using it on my salsa cutthroat for a couple of months now, and in this video, I'm going to tell you what I think of it. So let's get into it. To get right to the point, there's nothing all that unique about most of the top shelf specs. It comes in widths of 44, 47, 50, and 53 centimeters, has 25 degrees of flare, compact drops, and 7 degrees of sweep. 10 years ago, those numbers would have been super interesting, but by today's standards, it's a pretty run-of-the-mill gravel bar. The rise is where this bar stands out though, especially for its unique design. The majority of riser drop bars on the market get their rise through a large and sudden bend in the bar fairly close to the clamping area. Redshift went a different direction by basically taking a drop bar with no rise and then adding a lower tube to clamp your stem on. The upper tube is 25.4 millimeters in diameter and will work well with any lights, computers, or whatever you want to mount there. They also mention it could be used as an alternative stem clamping location if you decided you didn't want the rise, but you'll most likely need to use a shim with that. Otherwise, the lower bar fits a standard 31.8 stem. One of the main reasons for added rise on mountain bike bars is to shift your center of gravity for steep descents. That's not the case for the top shelf bar though. It's all about comfort in this case. And let me tell you, this is one comfortable bar. A lot of this is going to depend on which bar you get, what your current bike is like, and things like that, but no matter what, you're going to be a lot more upright than you currently are. This relieves a lot of pressure on your hands to put your body in a position you could ride in all day. Like I mentioned, I put mine on a cutthroat, which is already fairly upright to begin with, but I distinctly remember thinking on my first ride, why didn't they just design the bike like this in the first place? I chose the 50mm version because I thought the 70 would be overkill, and I still stand by that decision, but I think a lot of people will be really happy with the 70, especially if you're on a more traditional gravel bike that doesn't have as much stack built into the frame. Aside from the rise, the sweep and drop and flare also feel really ergonomic and will feel familiar if you've ever used the kitchen sink bar, because it's pretty much the same design. If you're not a big fan of sweep and the drops, Redshift recently released a low flare version of this and the kitchen sink, which only have 10 degrees of flare and a touch more drop for a more traditional road bar feel. No matter which version you get, I'd also highly recommend adding in the cruise control grip system they sell. It's totally optional, but it creates a much better spot for your hands in both the tops and drops to give you extra comfort, prevent numb hands, and give you some extra control when you're in the drops. Speaking of control, these bars are now my favorite drop bar for dirt and gravel riding. The widths I mentioned are measured at the hoods, so by the time you factor in the flare, you end up a full 11 centimeters wider in the drops. That means that on the 50 centimeter width that I chose, I'm over 600 mils wide when I'm in the drops. That width gives you a stable, controlled ride when things are fast and loose or technical. I originally said all this when I reviewed the kitchen sink bars, so it's not really a surprise given their similarities. But again, the rise takes this bar to the next level. As I mentioned in my video about how I've been converted to drop bars on dirt, the drops are the go-to position in technical situations. Unless you have a dropper post on your bike, this ends up shifting your weight forward and can make you feel like you're going to go over the bars on steep stuff. A ton of that is alleviated by the rise, which just adds to the confidence you gain from being in the drops. After a few spicier rides with the top shelf bar, I even found myself looking for wider and more aggressive tires for my bike because those were now the limiting factor, not being in the drops. The final area I want to discuss is utility, or how well does this bar do at mounting things, carrying stuff, things like that. As with any wider bar, there's plenty of places to mount lights, computers, phones, anything like that. The additional width between the hoods also gives you more room for larger bar bags if that's where you want to carry things for bikepacking and other adventures. Redshift also released a bag specific to this bar with straps for both the upper and lower sections for a really supportive and clean look. It's nice and roomy with 1.75 liters of room and an optional computer mount if you want to have your display a little farther out. I put it to the test on some very bumpy trails with a mini pump, multi-tool, and other recovery items inside, and it held everything securely with plenty of room to spare. It has a zipper on each side with magnets on the rear tab to allow easy access to your things. I did have some issues with that magnetic section of the fabric popping out when things got rough, but I think that'll only be an issue on newer bags that aren't quite broken in yet. I've had a chance to test quite a few products from Redshift, and each time I'm impressed with the quality, simplicity, and effectiveness of the designs they create. The top shelf is another great addition to that collection that I think a lot of people are really going to love. I loved their kitchen sink bar, and in many ways, this one feels like an extra rise version of the non-looped version of the kitchen sink. So if you're someone who's looking to get a more comfortable upright riding position on your drop bar bike, I would highly consider the top shelf bar from Redshift. I want to say thanks to Redshift for sending this bar, bag, and all of the other accessories out for me to review. If you want to know more about it, I've put a link down in the description to their website where you can check out all of the specs and options for yourself. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and a share, and let me know what you think of this bar down in the comments. And finally, if you want to support me, be sure to subscribe, buy a sticker or two from the link in the description, or leave a super thanks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.